Today I'm joined by Renuja Marshall, experienced design lead at IDP Education.
It's about getting everyone in the room very early on and keeping that communication and collaboration going throughout the process.
She's built her career at the intersection of psychology and design.
So before I actually even heard of UX design, I always had a passion for psychology, and I was always more creative than analytical.
And she's an expert at aligning user needs with business goals.
It's about really understanding that strategy first and the high level view, both what does the business want to really solve and also, what does the customer really need?
Especially in complex enterprise environments.
Renuja, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
First question, why are you a designer?
Oh, that's a good question. So with UX design specifically, I love that you always have to ask the why and, question the things around you. Is it really solving for your customer? So just really digging into that psychology of it mixed with visual design as well is what really drew me to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you know that from early on, or was it like a transition at a later stage? Because design's changed a lot over the years. So was that how you started?
So before I actually even heard of UX design, I always had a passion for psychology, and I was always more creative than analytical. So I started out studying graphic design and then eventually went to university and did more of a UX and IT sort of degree. And that was when I really delved into UX design and where I realized I could combine both psychology and design into the one job.
Yep. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the cool thing about design. It's not just about making things look pretty. It is about really understanding the user, and then also, I guess, the business metrics. The more senior you get, the more you have to understand how the business works, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Which is probably a good segue. I wanted to sort of delve into a topic, and we'll start with the power of planning. Did you want to get started from there?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
So what are some of the lessons that you've learned from projects that have either gone well or gone wrong?
So I've had, quite a number of jobs and projects that I've worked on in the past. And when I look back on the ones that particularly didn't go well or didn't meet targets, I find the issues that they've all had have fallen into four main categories. So I can talk through each one and then go through what I think from a high level the right approach could be.
Yes.
So I'll go through each one in detail, but just to list them off. So the first category of, I guess, issues, for lack of a better word, is only focusing on, the quick and great solution and not taking the time for thorough process. The second one would be whether consciously or unconsciously forgetting who your customer is throughout the journey of building. The third one would be only focusing on leads without any nurture piece in your product. And the fourth one would be focusing on the what instead of the why. So I can go through each one now, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the first one, only focusing on, that quick, low-hanging fruit solution. So I'll preface this by saying there's definitely a time and place for that you should only focus on the quick wins, but there's also a time and place to focus on the more thorough, UX planning and using UX to its full capability. So I guess it's about taking a step back and assessing which outcomes genuinely benefit from quick wins, like a quick A/B test, or picking the things that are quick to build, but which would actually benefit more sustainably from taking a step back and remembering who your customer is, doing the right research and, all the right UX activity to get the right result. So, for example, if you're wanting to increase leads in your product, but everyone is continually building solutions based on guesswork, or there's no nurture piece, which I'll touch on later, to entice users to stay on the product, then the leads aren't ever going to increase substantially as a result. And I think also looking at the structures you have in your workplace. So, for example, if your design team is just burning and churning designs, but there's no design system in place, no matter how fast your designers work, if there's no design system in place, their designs are never going to be completely precise between designers and between designer and developer as well. So it's just about looking at your structures and knowing when to take a step back and remembering who your customer is and what that customer needs.
I'm going to go back to something you said at the start.
Yeah.
We were talking about aligning to almost problems, to understand where to take the quick wins or not. Do you, I guess, try and understand what the business strategy and vision is before you jump straight into trying to find the quick wins? Because I think you can look at the overall problem and then pick that apart to go, all right, these things we're going to be able to overcome faster in the right way, as opposed to these are just small things that we can do quickly and hack our way through it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's about really understanding that strategy first and the high level view. Both what does the business want to really solve, and also, what does the customer really need? And I think when you understand both those things, it sort of leads the answer to, what's the low hanging fruit and what's the larger problem we need to solve. So I guess it's more approaching from the why rather than, what do we have left to work with kind of approach.
Yeah, definitely. So have you got a process to really align and understand what the business needs before you go to the customer to understand how you're going to solve their pain point?
One thing I like to do is look at any research that potentially has been done in the past, look at previous projects, look at what competitors are doing, finding out what current pain points are and who are customers we can talk to. So this is for that, say if it's a larger piece of work that needs more thorough UX thinking, and making sure that all the key stakeholders are aligned. So product manager, lead designer, lead tech, because I think if you don't get that alignment at the start as well, that's when things can also, I guess, either fall apart or the hanging fruit items get picked or things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And have you got a process
Yeah.
that you follow in your current team? Like obviously, working as a product team and having all of those people in the room, like how do you ensure that everyone is on the same page and aligned to, I guess, the number one challenge first?
Yeah, so I think it's about getting everyone in the room very early on and keeping that communication and collaboration going throughout the process. So ensuring right at the start, is everyone aligned on, does everyone even agree on what the strategy is and what the problem we're trying to solve is? Do we agree on key metrics? Do we agree on how to solve the problem and how much time is needed for everything? And basically, the earlier on you solve for those things and align on those things, the process will just fall into place. And then you can start to ask, what do I need? Do I have a design system? Do I have the right feedback process in place? And so on.
And design system, that's about creating efficiencies, right? Like if everyone's trying to come up with their own designs and make it look similar, but in their own slight way, everything's going to be different. So it's a pretty important place to start, I guess. In terms of, I guess, moving on, going back to that, was there any, I guess, quick wins that you tried to maybe force in the wrong way that you learnt a lot from? So like you picked something and tried to, I guess, turn it into a quick win, but it wasn't the right thing to focus on. And was there any lessons there that you learnt and were able to change next time you came around?
Yeah, so I think when things like that happen when you're relying a lot on guesswork and not on either, customer research or what's been, lessons from the past and things like that. So, when you're designing something and you've just sort of guessed, oh, maybe this will work or that will work, it often results in a situation where customers aren't, engaging with the product the right way, or they're dropping off, or so I think minimizing that guesswork as much as possible is what will prevent all of that.
Okay, because that was your next point, which was forgetting the customer. So how do you make sure you are spending time to really understand what the customer problem is?
Yeah, so I think that comes down to spending the time to getting a good persona in place based off, your history of customer research in that business. And if you don't have that, then building one from either new customer interviews, or if it's a new problem you're solving, definitely allowing time for those interviews as well. Another thing I'll preface is, as designers, it is important to, work within your business's capabilities and resources and technical capabilities as well. But there can sometimes be a point where you do need to just push past your current capabilities. If something's not working, there's probably a reason for that. And maybe we need to look at other things. Is it training for the team? Is it additional resource? Is it just pivoting and going about the project a completely different way? So I think while it is important for designers to be creative and adapt to constraints the business may have, there is also a point where if we're consistently adapting to limitations, you're never really going to uplift your solutions or create room for innovation as a result.
Is that, I'm going to question that, is that a design maturity thing if you're always just coming up against limitations? Because it's obviously not going to make your job very easy if everything's going to be a problem to start with. How do you overcome that from a designer or when you're leading a design team? So is there ways that you can combat that before you actually go down that path?
Yeah, so one thing I found that's helped is, so say if the level of design maturity the business is at is just pumping out designs, which in some cases that is the right thing to do, and as I mentioned, some cases you need more UX thinking. So what I find the best approach is, say, as a result of the business only allowing 2 weeks to build designs because that's all they believe there is to the UX process, find time at the start of that 2 weeks to do your UX research activity, even if it's crammed, even if maybe there's a few late nights, do that customer research, document everything, do your UX activity, and bring that back to the team and say, this is actually what I found. These are the problems I found. This is how I think we can solve it. And I think the more you do that and document that and show evidence of the value that it's providing, the more the business sees that and wants to, collaborate with UX to its full capability. So I think it's just about, it sounds so simple, but it's just about doing the work anyway, regardless if the team has allocated time and resource for that.
Yes, that's all well and good for a one-off, right? To get a user case there, but how do you educate the business? Because you don't want to do late nights every time a new project comes around, just because they haven't allocated enough time to spend time thinking and doing the proper research. You don't want to take that outside of work hours. So how do you use that to educate that, all right, well, this is what I've done, and this is how I've done it, and this is why we need to allocate this much time to this. So next time you've got to come up against the same sort of challenges, you're able to get a bit more time and flexibility there.
Yeah, so definitely not for every project. I wouldn't recommend that because, we don't want too many late nights, but just especially when it's a larger piece as a once-off thing, people do see that effort. But I think in terms of a more sustainable way as well, in combination with that, some businesses have monthly showcases where you can showcase what you're working on, find opportunities in your business where you can talk about UX and talk about its benefit, talk about how to approach the UX team with the problem you may be trying to solve. So I guess back to my original point of keeping that collaboration and communication going throughout everything as well.
It's so fascinating. So a lot of what you just spoke about was not so much about the users and understanding the users. It was working with understanding the business and almost educating them on the value of working with the users, if that makes sense, which is a fascinating part of what design is, right? Designers are so user-centric, whereas they need to be able to communicate back to the business the value that they are adding. So when you do get that 2 weeks to run that design process, you have enough time allocated to do it justice, and you're not just, I guess, cutting corners to get a quick win because that's what the business thinks it needs. You're actually helping them do a better job through education.
Yeah, that's right. And I just think the more you do that, people do see that. So I think it may not seem like it at the start, but it does pay off in the long term.
I agree. And that's a part of the maturity thing, right? You've got to take everyone, it's easier when you're in a new organization and they appreciate and understand design. But when you're in a larger organization and design hasn't always been a part of the process, I think it is that education piece, and it's a huge part of what designers need to do is take people on that journey, and that stakeholder communication piece is very important. Moving on to, I guess, the next point that you had, which was focusing on leads. Did you want to talk me through what you meant by that?
Yeah. So obviously we do need to look at business metrics and, how to generate leads through good UX. But I think it's also important to focus on the nurture piece as well. So basically when I think of features, I think of them as either a lead generating feature or a nurture piece. And the difference between the two, if I try and make up an example, so a lead generating piece would be getting a user to click contact us and the user contacts you. You're generating a lead from that. But a nurture piece would be maybe having a feature where the user can track their progress, or they can see a history of their shopping cart, or something that sort of nurtures the user throughout their journey of the product. And this might sound counterintuitive, but I don't think every feature built needs to be a lead generating feature in order to get leads. Because users do see that if all the features you have in your product are pure, a contact us, sign up, that kind of lead gen focus, users do feel that, they need, you need to create a reason for users to be advocates of your product and want to stay on it.
When you're doing an airline booking and you have to go, it's usually a budget airline, right? But you go through 100-step process to get to the end. So you buy your ticket and then do you want this? Do you want this? And it kind of feels like that process. It's just stop trying to sell me extra stuff. Just let me get my flights and get out of here. But I agree, focusing on, I guess, users that you've already got and making their experience pleasant. It's way easier to keep someone than acquire new people, new customers, right? So like making sure that I guess the shopping cart experience is pleasant and that it's got memory and that sort of stuff. That is a huge, like, look, it's a sales tactic, but it's just a user experience, and it's much more enjoyable than, hey, click here and buy this and do this. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
so how do you do that? Like, sorry, I kind of cut you off to
No,
to
that's okay.
jump into my
That's
point
okay.
about airlines
Yeah.
and my grief there. Yeah. So did you want to go continue on with what you were saying before I cut you off?
Oh, no, that's okay. Oh no, yeah, that was basically the gist of it. So, you know, and you can also use those nurture pieces to generate leads. I think that might be a more sustainable way to go about it, where the user doesn't feel forced or feel like the whole thing is just getting them to sign up or join something or anything like that. So with the example of, say, a progress feature where the user can see where they are in the journey of their products, from there, that's a great opportunity to, you know, cross-sell to other things by seeing a history of their shopping cart or their favorites if it's an e-commerce product. You know, from there, you've got the lead gen of getting them to buy that thing. So I think it's about focusing on, like I think I mentioned before, the why. You know, why is the user here? And then from there, you've got your opportunities for lead generation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think focusing on the both elements, like, do you enjoy either side of that piece? Like, if you were doing a feature, where would you rather be spending your time and maybe doing user interviews to understand what the value is there?
I'll say the nurture piece because I think it's a more natural way of getting business, like leads for the business. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think I'd rather that as
Yeah.
well, rather than,
Yeah.
hey, if I put a button here, are you going to buy quicker?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe. So you mentioned also focusing on the whats and not the whys, or was it the other way around? The whys, not the whats. Which way did you say it?
So I said the what and not the why, as in focusing
Okay.
on the what and not the why is the issue. So we should focus on the why. Yeah, basically what I meant by that is, so you're obviously talking to your customers is your opportunity to find out, you know, what pain points they may be having, what they're looking for. It's the opportunity for innovation. But I think this only works best when you're not only actively listening, but asking the right questions. So this is where I meant, you know, it's good to focus on the why, not the what. So if you're asking direct questions like, what are 3 things you'd like to see, or what can we do better? I don't think you're going to get the right outcome, because I think you as the UX or the product expert should have the expertise to build the right feature. So we don't really need a customer to tell us that directly. And I think also sometimes what people say they want may not be literally what they want in the product. I think it's up to us to interpret that. So if you're focusing on the why, you'll be asking questions more around how they're feeling, you know, what's their environment like when they're using the product, what's motivating them every day, what are their goals within this context. Because I think once you figure out what the feeling and the goal and the motivation is, and you connect to that feeling, that's how you get that lifelong customer.
It's an interesting point. I read something
Yeah.
the other day, and it was like,
Yeah.
to actually get the real why, you've got to ask why like 8 times or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you have a set of questions that you would generally ask to try and get to the real core of their, I guess, desire?
Yeah, so it depends, I guess, what the product is and, you know, the scenario and everything. But just generally speaking, I'd probably start off by asking, you know, even beyond the digital application, I'd ask, what does a typical day look like for you? You know, what are the main goals you'd like to use from, you know, in this XYZ context? Like, I start with a really broad why, and then eventually those questions get narrower and narrower. But those questions get narrower based on what this customer is telling me, not based on what I've, you know, planned previously. So really understanding the why around everything before I get to the nitty gritty and the detail.
Okay. And then from a
Yeah.
design perspective, obviously you always want to solve the user's problems. As you, I guess, developed as a designer in your career, do you now find it easier to, I guess, understand what to focus on and what not to focus on? Because you mentioned earlier that sometimes users don't really know what they need. They're just trying to tell you something. So how do you really get to the crux of what they need? And is that just the maturity as a designer thing and understanding or working with users to go on that process?
Yeah, I think it is just a maturity and experience thing. So over time, you know, you look back on your work and think, oh, I should have really done it that way. So it is just a learning thing. One very specific example I can give is, so say if there's a form where users need to submit to, let's say, create an account, and you want to show which fields are required and which fields are optional. So generally speaking, the optional fields should have the word optional, and the required fields are left blank because users, they instinctively know when they see the form, yep, this is what I need to fill in. But if you were to user test that and say, what do you prefer, the red asterisk for required or the word optional if it's optional, they'll say the red asterisk when they're actually doing the opposite in real life. So I think it's just about remembering examples like that and taking what they're saying and not taking what they're saying literally, but again, coming back to what they're feeling and why, and how can you address that instead of what they're literally saying.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So like when
Yeah.
you've got like a team of designers that maybe aren't as experienced as you, like how do you take them on that journey to really make sure that they are trying to understand the user's needs and not try and solve the problem for the user?
Yeah, so especially if it's a more junior designer, whenever they do customer interviews, we usually have like a debrief after, and we just go through what the customer talked about. How the other thing I like my team and myself to do as well is document everything, like I mentioned before. So talk about how do we want to document this so other stakeholders get it. And so from there, based on what the designer is telling me, I can help them with, how did the customer feel though when they said this? What was happening when this happened? And I just think through that constant engagement and collaboration with your team, they'll eventually get to that point. So I think it's just about giving that your team the continued, support and education.
I think that's a really important point. I think the only way anyone's going to get better at anything is through continuous learning and education. You mentioned how you want to record this to pass it on to stakeholders. How do you generally record it internally to make sure you're getting the right message to share with stakeholders? And do you have to clean it up so it's in their communication style?
Yeah. So sometimes I've been told I can sound a bit too UXy and to just use really simple terms. So that's something I've been working on. But generally I use Confluence for documentation. So I organize everything as simply as I can. So first I'll have, if I backtrack a bit, for each project, I'll have a group called UX Research for each project. And within that, I'll have each activity and the date each activity happens. So the first activity could be the actual interview, and that'll just be quick notes of the interview. And then the next activity could be the affinity mapping process. And so I'll map out what learnings did we gather as a team from that, what were the common issues found. And then from there, another page on, based on this, what do we as a product team think we should solve for first? So basically for each UX activity, I'll have a page or so of documentation just to show evidence and to keep people aligned as well.
Yeah. And how much has your communication style changed? Because you said that you sometimes sound a little bit too UX.
Yeah.
How did you change your communication style to ensure that it does align with other stakeholders or non-designers?
So that's something I have to consciously do. So sometimes I do have to stop myself and think, because for example, I have had jobs in the past where even just saying the word users is confusing. So I've had to sort of, remember to say customer. Yeah. It happens. So when I talk about design systems, I forget that maybe some stakeholders generally may not have been exposed to that before. So I think it's about just looking at all these words that, people might think are very UX and thinking, how can I explain that in a different way?
Interesting. Because what did you use instead of user? Or what's the new terminology?
Just customer. But so sometimes I find since then I sort of alternate between saying user and customer.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. What's one word that is just a random funny question, but what's one word that you use really regularly that people just I have no idea what you're saying?
Oh, sometimes depending on the level of design maturity in the company, even just the word design system can throw people a bit. Sometimes I'll be using that term for months, and then one person will say, actually, what do you mean by that, months later? Things like that have happened in the past.
And how do you describe design system to someone that doesn't understand what a design system is?
So I sort of explain it as a source of truth for designers and developers to ensure design's precise and consistent throughout, just to build efficiencies throughout designers, building out designs in Figma and developers building it out in code. And then I also separate that into what I call for simplicity an HTML design system. So the one the front-end developers will build and how it needs to align to the one we've done in Figma. I just try to break down the steps and explain what it actually is. And then I can go back to calling it a design system.
It's almost overly complicated, right? Yeah. Just tell them it's to help with operational efficiency and ensure design is consistent.
Oh, true. I should have just said that. But
well,
Yeah.
It's shorter, it's more succinct, and really that's what it
Yeah.
is, right? It's just to make
Yeah.
sure things work faster, because if you've got 10 people trying to do the same thing in their own way,
Yeah.
not overly
Yeah.
efficient. But if everyone has a system or a process to follow, consistency and efficiency, which is, I guess, what any company wants when they're paying for
Yeah.
staff, right?
Yeah.
Renuja, it was an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I learned so much today. You're full of a lot of great information. So thank you so much. If
Thank
anyone wants to
you.
reach out and have a chat offline, is LinkedIn the best way to contact you?
Yeah, LinkedIn would be good.
Amazing. Once again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Now remember, please hit subscribe. And if you could leave us a like and a comment, it helps people like yourself find the video.